Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Bull City Coordinators Duke Football Coverage Podcast. If you are listening to this now, you know where to find us. You know what our website is. Go there, check it out, bullcitycoordinators.com. We are on all the socials at Duke FB coverage, though, primarily posting up over at Blue Sky now a fair amount. I'm only over on Twitter, apparently, to troll Treadmill Horse and a couple other Virginia Tech accounts. But that's me. That's what I'm doing, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with who I am and what I've become in my life. All right, big win. Big win for the Blue Devils on Saturday, last home game. Great way to send a couple of a good senior class off, especially two wide receivers. I'm gonna hold back tears thinking about this. I think this is one of the times that it's okay for men to cry. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. But our next guest is a publisher and writer over at Devils Illustrated, and to a much less significant extent for our fan base's purposes, Deacons Illustrated. You all know him. He's a good friend of mine. It is, of course, Conor O'Neill. How are you, sir?
Doing well. I'm happy to be in the final week of crossover season, as we in the biz call it. A lot of basketball going on, a lot of football going on. So after this week, one of my teams is finished playing games, and the other one will just have one left. So it's kind of a freeing feeling.
Well, before we get into that, you and I were talking about it a little bit off the record. Some of us who were at the game didn't become aware of this till later, but apparently Malik Murphy shot some double guns, shall we say. As a man whose last name is Bird, I assume it was a statement to me and to my dad saying, "Hey, we're going to get you to 9-3 like your preseason prediction," but maybe people didn't quite understand what that was about. So fill us in on that.
So of course, it was after Duke's first snap. Malik Murphy hits Eli Pankel on an 86-yard touchdown post right down the middle of the field. In the exuberant celebration of uh, Duke's quarterback, Malik Murphy extended both middle fingers to Blue Devil Tower. This is where I was mistaken because I knew the camera shot had him like pointed right at them. I just figured it was an opposite side of the stadium camera and that he was doing it toward the side where a lot of Virginia Tech fans were. You could see all of their maroon and orange. I mean, they stand out like sore thumbs when you're talking about a team with blue in their colors and blue seats. So I was mistaken. He was doing it toward the the Blue Devil Tower where all the media and all the cameras are. Um, which kind of makes it like on the surface makes it kind of confusing. Like, why would a quarterback be doing that? So we got the answer today as we're recording Monday night. He was doing it as basically the easiest way to sum this up is it's a practice field joke or prod from his offensive coordinator, Jonathan Brewer, gone too far. Um, Apparently, the story was last week in practice, they were really struggling to hit that route and they ran it over and over again and couldn't get any completions on it. And Jonathan Brewer told Malik that, hey, if you hit on one of these during the game, you have the right or the freedom to flip me off. Um, so of course they get out there and run it to perfection. It's an 86-yard touchdown, and I don't know Malik's exact age. I imagine he's about 21 or 22. Maybe he's got an early birthday and he's only 20. However old he is, the young 20 something that he is, he went a little too far. Went double barreled salute to the Duke coaching box. I don't know if I've ever heard of a quarterback flipping off his own coach's box. Um, and like I'm laughing. It's a joking matter to me. I'm not in the meeting room with these guys. Like I don't get the sense that Manny Diaz was all that thrilled with it. I don't think Jonathan Brewer was all that thrilled with it. I'm sure Malik has probably been talked to and it's been explained to him. Maybe he had some extra running he had to do. But end of the day, it's just it's a weird thing that happened. You've got to talk about it. There's a story up on Devils Illustrated about it. I think there's a little bit of relief that it wasn't toward fans. Like it wasn't, I just it was about 10 or 11 months ago. I just covered the basketball game at NC State where DJ Horn flicked off the official when the official had his back turned, and that got an ACC reprimand. Like he got a slap on the wrist from the ACC. There was nothing that came out from the ACC publicly about this. It's kind of move on and kind of I don't know what else there is to say on it.
He is 20, and I mean, the only problem was it was on TV. That's really the only
Yeah.
bad thing about it. But it's entertaining and it's humorous. But frankly, I mean, look, as old and haggard and beaten down as I am, and this morning, for example, I was out running. I was doing my normal morning run, and this golden retriever just barrels up behind me from where I'm running and knocks me down,
Damn.
runs into my left side. I'm listening to a podcast. I don't hear it coming, and jacks up kind of my right leg. And so I'm thinking about that as if I could throw, if I could throw, I had to have my wife come get me because I was afraid I'd pulled something and I didn't want to keep running on it. But if I could throw the ball that far and hit on an 86-yard touchdown, as beautiful as that was, I might, even at my age, at 43, I might do something like that. So, cut him some slack. The only person who deserved to get the middle fingers thrown at him was the person I got. If you check out my Instagram, I got some beautiful shots of Eli's catch, okay, from the stands. But somebody jumped up both arms right in front of me as he crosses into the end zone. So it was ruined. Like I got Malik throwing, I got the catch, I got Eli celebrating, and then in the end zone was cut off. So that was the only person who really deserved it, but whatever. Crazy game though, right? I mean that there was a lot of ugly, even as a to I mean that was the epitome of triangle good, as the OG folks like to say. It was an ugly win, but I'll take it.
It's just one of those games where like you go into the post game press conference and you're talking to a coach who won the game, and you're almost trying to gear yourself into, hey, remember we got to ask positive questions because they did win the game because they did so much wrong. Like you have a 14-0 lead that becomes a 17-14 deficit. Then you build it back to two touchdowns at 31-17, and you give that up. And Virginia Tech had, I think, three possessions after it was made a 3-point game. So Duke was so close to losing this game after being in control of it at two different junctures. Um, for the second straight game, Duke was unable to do anything on the ground, just an anemic rush offense. And then finally, when their rush offense gets going on the last drive, what you think is going to be the last drive, Star Thomas first goes out of bounds when he needed to stay in bounds, and then fumbles the ball away. And I mean, not to crush the kid because he's had a great season. I mean, it's been 11 games of, where would this Duke team be if not for Star Thomas? I mean, Peyton Jones would be getting the ball a lot more often because they haven't had Jaquez Moore for much of it. So, but you also have to address the fact that he made two awful plays late in the game that gave Virginia Tech another chance to win it. So, or tie it and send it to overtime, whatever.
Yeah, why didn't he
Um,
go down? I mean, did anybody ask that at the presser? I was surprised Star didn't just fall down.
no, and I mean, it's something that I always, I always, I know it's my job to ask and it's others' jobs to ask. I also never was playing a ACC football game and I've never had to make the decisions in that moment. It's so easy to sit there after the fact and Monday morning quarterback it, but it's just such a the this those types of things, they happen so quickly. I never feel comfortable asking a player or a coach to like, hey, tell me what you were thinking in this exact moment. Especially for a guy that made the right play earlier this year. Like the UConn game, he had a chance to score and didn't, and that's why Duke won the game.
Right. And that's what was so surprising. We saw him going over there. I thought at first he got pushed out. And then when you saw it on
Uh,
replay, that's not what happened. I was just surprised that a fifth year senior didn't just drop to the ground there. That was a little stunning,
Yeah.
but that is what it is. I can understand maybe not asking him, but you would. I think it is fair, at the press conference to say, "Hey, did y'all talk to your running backs about falling down and
Yeah.
burning a little more clock?"
Yeah, that's
One
fair.
thing, you did say this about the running game. We were sitting in section 30, and a lot of us were just saying, well, with the exception of Blacksburg Chris, who was there, but I just kept saying the whole time, and some of the rest of us did, was why aren't we even trying to run the ball? It just seemed like it was a strategic choice not to do it. Did you have any thoughts or observations on that?
I think that's just how much they run read-based stuff. And I think it's I've dealt with this a lot more with the Wake Forest side of things because they run a read-based offense and have done it for many, many years. I don't think Kevin John's offense had some read in it, but I think Jonathan Brewer's has more in it. Um, Sometimes you can convince a team to not run the ball just by the way you line up pre-snap as a defense. And I think that's what happens to Duke. I think as long as you put enough guys near the line of scrimmage, the calculus and the quarterback's brain and the calculus now that you have the on-field communication up to the 15-second mark on the play clock, coaching staffs and quarterbacks are just wired to abandon the run, even if you think you're going to have an advantage, and even if your personnel is going to win some matchups for you in the run game, the the pre-snap calculus of it is, hey, they've got so many guys near the line of scrimmage, and we have this many. We have to throw the ball. Um, it's frustrating. Like I get it, and that's where I think football and the way we talk about football needs to evolve past the point where we're just talking about, well, Duke's offense called this many number of run plays and this many number of pass plays. Like it's never that simple. And that like I don't know of any offense in football really that is that simple anymore because every level of football now you've got reads and RPOs.
Right. And watching it, I just thought that there was kind of a calculated decision to pass that seemed to be working. I just kind of go back to put your quarterback under center and do some old school traditional handoffs, and that might open up that running game because that was really what Duke needed to help
Yeah.
grind the clock out. And when the Blue Devils committed to it, it worked. But I, I kind of want to get your thoughts on this because you had talked about the two leads that were lost. Well, the second one was almost lost, rather, uh, where it got close again. The one that concerned me more than anything else was when Duke was up, what was it, 31-17? First quarter early stuff that can happen in games. I feel like it's just kind of a game's of momentum. But when you take it back, that's where you've got to put your foot down and on the throat. And so that was really concerning to me more so than the early 14-point lead getting lost. I mean, is that do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm with you with it being concerning. Honestly, I think if this happens in the first half of the season, you're kind of like, oh man, this is a bad sign moving forward. This is, send up some flares for what's going to happen in the second half of the season. This is game 11. Like I think to a degree, it's just kind of this is who Duke has been this year. They've been a team that flirts with disaster around every corner. I mean, what game have you really even felt comfortable about them having a lead this year?
Yeah, not even the UConn game. That was a tight game.
Right. So it's just kind of who they've been. It's who they're gonna be probably at Wake Forest this week and in whatever bowl they're in. Um, I know it's not good for blood pressure, but at some point you just look at the bottom line and it says Duke is 8-3 with a chance to have a double-digit win season for the second time in program history. At some point it just becomes who gives who gives a shit about how they got to that point.
Oh, I know. It's concerning to me that when you're up by that amount, and then also too on that what should have been the final drive where Star fumbles, you can't put them away. that was alarming. The Florida State thing was different, I felt like, because there was just a strategic choice to limit offensively what you were doing,
Yes.
because there was no confidence that the coaches just said, look, the offense for Florida State is not going to do anything, just don't make any mistakes.
Yeah.
This
Exactly.
was this was concerning. Those elements of it. I mean, it ended up working out somehow, some way, like we've been saying all year. But before we turned to Wake, this was the last home game for two cornerstone, among other people, two cornerstone wide receivers for that program. Somehow, some way, Duke replaced an entire defensive line, it seemed like, in the offseason, and retooled the offensive line very well. Uh, who is going to play receiver next year, and is it okay to cry when Jordan Moore and Eli Pankel are no longer in Durham?
To answer the last part first, I mean, yeah, I think so. I've loved talking to them and covering them over the last few years. You just get the sense that neither one of them ever has a bad day. Um, I mean, and maybe they have bad tests in in March when we don't talk to them, but when they're on the football, whether we're talking to them on a Tuesday morning, before a game or after a game in the post game presser, they're always happy. They might be disappointed with the loss if we're talking to them then, but they're always just genuinely seem to be good people, and good dudes. So I'm gonna miss them. Right now, I kind of would throw out I don't know how sizzling of a hot take this is, but I think Duke's leading receiver next year is probably playing football for another team right now. Um, I just I think you can count on Samir Hagens to a degree. He's just been so inconsistent for the last two
Don't sell
years
that
that
stock. Don't sell that stock.
I know I'm not Jordan though. I mean, I just I I have skepticism because he was able to do it 2 seasons ago, for a good sustained 5 or 6 game stretch, and I don't know if in the last 2 years he's had good back-to-back games. So I'm hesitant to trust that he'll be able to put it together for a full season. I think Chase Tyler is talented, but it's a big leap to go from seldomly seldom playing as a freshman to go-to guy in your second year in college. Um, a guy like Quayshawn Brown might be the odds-on favorite if I were to say right now of guys on the roster right now. He might be the odds-on favorite to lead him in catches just because he's going to operate out of the slot. He's going to get a lot of those jet sweep, pop pass type plays. They're going to try to get the ball to him in space often. And he did show, like he showed in the UConn game and he's shown a couple other times he can catch the ball down the field. He's not just a running back on the outside that's going to catch his carries. Um, he can make some downfield plays for you. But man, when you're talking about the bevy of targets that Eli Pankel and Jordan Moore have gotten this year and how you're going to replace them. Um, what this offense wants to be in terms of downfield shots and getting vertical. Man, I just it's tough to peer into the crystal ball and see a solid future at the receiver position right now, at least.
Yeah, to your point, as far as back-to-back games, against Elon and Northwestern, 4 catches apiece for Hagens. The big catch against Georgia Tech, which if he can play Georgia Tech every game, I mean, let's tweak the transfer portal rules for that guy. He had a big game against Miami, 9 for 139 and a touchdown. And then he only had 4 catches for 16 yards against State, but they all came at big moments, it felt like. And that one touchdown, of course, was huge. So that I felt like that 16-yard stat line was a little misleading. But Hagens had 2 catches for 13. One was a loss of 2 yards and along of 15. So that's a fair point. All these Virginia Tech fans I've been talking smack to are going to have a lot to say potentially. Although I don't think we play next year, but they may have a lot to say about the Blue Devils. It'll have to be a different offense, I think, to a large extent. But we'll see. how that plays itself out. So, uh, one more question before we get to Wake. My dad brought this up today. He reminded me that he did pick Duke 9-3 preseason. Um, so I don't know what the rule is. I mean, do I have to bring him back on the pod? Do I have to do a special episode? How should we handle that if that occurs?
I think that's a special episode right there. I mean that's a hell of a like. I messed with Jordan about being the optimistic Duke fan. I don't even think he had him going 9-3. Um, I'd be curious which games he had them losing if he picked them game by game, and which ones Duke actually lost and matched those up.
You know, I don't. I'd have to go back and check. I think he just did an overall 9-3
Gotcha.
prediction. Lee Rodeo and I picked them together. He went 10-2. I went 8-4. Although
They might wind
honestly,
up right in the middle.
yeah, honestly, the way the SMU game played out, I think Lee may have a point. Should be 10-2, but of course, the way the Virginia Tech game panned out, I mean that I'm not so sure that that's one that Duke deserved to win. But as we all know from Unforgiven, deserves got nothing to do with it. All right, so Dad, if you're listening, Conor votes special episode. We'll see. Uh, let's talk about Wake. Where is Wake right now, and what can we expect on Saturday?
Oh boy. Um, Wake is one loss away from having the exact same record they had last year at 4-8. They would have one more ACC win. Last year they were 1-7 and at the bottom of the ACC. This year they've already got two ACC wins under the belt. They won at State, just like Duke. They just lost at Miami, just like Duke did earlier this month, actually. Um, and they won one out at Syracuse. Um, Not Syracuse, Stanford. Um, both of these teams actually beat UConn close too. The the common opponents this year were very strange for yours truly in the dual coverage beat. Um, I mean, Wake has been better than they were last year. Even though, like I said about the record, they have the same wins. They're a loss away from going winless in November for the second straight season. Um,
No win November is not really what you want.
no, and I mean, I've got to do the math, but I think it's an 8 game November losing streak.
Mm.
Uh, 3 this year, 4 last year, and then they lost the regular season finale in 2022 was in Durham, I think. Sam Hartman's last regular season game for Wake Forest. We'll word it that way because he did play the bowl game that year. But anyway, Wake's offense has been better than it was last year. Of course, that was a low bar to clear. Last year was a pretty much total disaster on that side of the ball. It started with getting the quarterback position wrong. They've gotten steadier quarterback play this year. It's not been elite. It's not been anywhere close to what they had with John Wolford, Jamie Newman, and Sam Hartman. But Hank Bachmeier has had a somewhere between an okay and decent season. Um, the best player you need to know about their offense is Damon Claiborne, the running back. Wake will try to put the ball in his hands as often as possible. He needed an IV late in the first half against Miami because he had gotten the ball so much and because he had returned to kickoff 100 yards for a touchdown. He's just it's funny. We talked to the Duke coaches going into last week's game about how Bashal Tutin was a little bit of a different profile than every running back Duke had played up to that point, in the fact that he was the first one they had seen that could really like score from anywhere on the field. Like no matter what the play, no matter what score situation, no matter where they are on the field, Bashal Tutin can score a touchdown. If he breaks the right tackles, if he gets the right leverage. And that's like Duke has played a lot of good running backs, but he's really the first one that was like that has that home run ability. Damon Claiborne is the same way. Damon Claiborne is just he's phenomenal at breaking tackles. He's got a great center of balance. He's I think less than 20 yards away from having a 1,000-yard season on the ground. They use him out of the backfield as a receiver more often than Wake has typically used running backs in the pass game. So he's just it's always cloudy when you get into this discussion about the best running back under Dave Clawson. He's been there 11 years and only had one 1,000-yard rusher, and that was Tate Carney, not Tate, Cade Carney in 2019. Um, the most talented running back was probably Kenneth Walker III. I tend to think he doesn't get credit in the who's the best running back at Wake Forest under Clawson discussion for things that he did at Michigan State in his 1 year there or what he's doing now in the NFL. So I look at it as Damon Claiborne is the best running back Wake has had in the last decade. He's that explosive. He's that much of a big play threat. Wake's defense, it's much maligned. They've basically reverted to this shell game type of defense where they'll let you complete a 12-yard hook to the outside. Their only goal is to keep things in front of them, make teams snap it 10 to 12 times on drives instead of giving up a 5-play 75-yard drive. They just want to make you inconsistent. They want to make you impatient. They want to get you to the point where you're trying to press the issue. And honestly, like when I say those things, and then when I think about some of the mistakes that Malik Murphy has made this year, that might line up in Wake's favor. We just talked to Jonathan Brewer today about Malik kind of has a tendency to, and his receivers also have a tendency to try to press the issue when they think that they're not hitting on the plays that they should be hitting on, and that is what leads to 3 first half interceptions sometimes.
So looking at that, I'm trying to think about it. I mean, are they dropping safeties back such that Duke could just come out and run the ball and give? I guess if we're going to see Jaquez Moore, it's going to be Saturday since he didn't play against Virginia Tech. Is that a game where you could just see the three running backs just get carry after carry?
It could be like that's something that Miami ran the ball really well against Wake last week. Wake does have decent defensive linemen and decent linebackers. I tend to think their linebackers haven't graded out well. And they've taken a lot of brunt of the blame for the defense's struggles. I tend to think that has a lot to do with them trying to overcompensate and drop back in the pass game because their pass defense has been so atrocious. Um, but yeah, it is a game where again, it'll depend on the look. Like it'll depend on what the how many guys are in the box. Um, if Duke sees Wake playing with, 12 yards of cushion on the outside, then Duke is just going to run slants and hooks and take their 6 to 8 yards at a time and try to just matriculate the ball down the field. And that's basically how Wake was in the game at Miami. It was a 20-14 game going into the fourth
Right.
quarter. And that Miami offense, I mean, you saw it.
Cam Ward, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Cam Ward, if he's not throwing bombs, he gets impatient and he tries to make something happen that's not there. That's how he threw an interception. I think it was late in the first half, just like trying to shovel pass into the middle of the field while he's scrambling. It was a boneheaded play, but that's what some of these college quarterbacks do when you make them just take layups essentially and take away their 3-point shots.
So, I mean, I get if you see the alignment of the defense looking more towards throwing the ball, you want to throw the ball. But I do go back to some of those old school coaches would always tell their hotshot young offensive coordinator, run the ball, run the ball. And I would like to see a little bit more of that at times. And I get the matchups, and I'm not arguing about that. And Diaz and those guys know a lot more about football than I will ever know. But you can't abandon the run. I mean, by all rights, I mean, that stat line for Thomas was completely dependent on that the last couple of carries
Yeah.
to get where it got. And
No,
even then,
I'm
it wasn't that great.
I'm 100% with you. Like to me, I sit there and I understand the X's and O's. It's been explained to me God knows how many times, and I know every offensive coordinator has forgotten more about football than I know. but that's on some basic level of my knowledge of sports and my experience in sports, it comes down to, shouldn't you impose your will on the other team and make them adjust instead of you adjusting before they've even done anything other than line up? Like, shouldn't isn't the whole part of, like, the most fun part of sports is imposing your will on someone else and doing to them the one thing that they're trying to stop you from doing. And in modern football, that kind of gets lost.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. It is concerning. So one other thing about Wake, they seem to be better on the road than they are at home. Three of their four wins are on the road, and they have had some games at home that have been close ones. A 1 point loss to UVA, 3 point loss to Louisiana. Uh, but they've
Yeah,
also,
the Cal loss was a 10-point loss on paper, but it was a 3-point game inside the 2-minute mark, and Wake had the ball and just threw an interception, and then Cal scored a late touchdown.
yeah. So you got to think there's going to be some motivation to get a win at home, but there's also going to be motivation for the Blue Devils to be able to hang a banner saying North Carolina state champions, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what, to me, that's the boilerplate motivations for each team is, Wake is going to have a large contingent of seniors going through their final home game. And it's interesting, like I've kind of run the gamut of the way you can talk about senior classes at Wake Forest. You had, back when I first started covering them, it was 2017. So we were talking to guys that committed and played for Wake when they were awful and 3-9 in back-to-back seasons in 2014 and 15, to the point where they had some success, and they won the Belk Bowl over Texas A&M in 2017. Then, kind of as the program was built, you're talking to guys that, had only experienced success, or maybe committed to Wake Forest, and then every year they'd been at Wake Forest, they were in a bowl game and having a winning season. Then you're talking to guys that went to the ACC championship game as seniors. Now it's a little weird. Now you're talking about guys that committed when Wake was a program on the rise, and were part of elevating Wake. And now, it's not like this falls on any one player or any even one position group, but you're talking about guys that have been part of Wake's decline, and part of a program that they had a 7-year bowl streak that was snapped last year, and now they're staring down the barrel of a second straight 4-8 season. So it's interesting when you talk about Wake's motivation. Like, I did the math. I think there's 5 open spots for bowl eligibility right now. There's 16 teams with 5 wins, and there are 2 instances of teams at 5 and 6 playing each other. One of them's in the ACC with the Commonwealth Cup up north. I think the other one's like Michigan, Eastern Michigan, Western Michigan type thing. So basically, you have 12 teams vying for 3 spots. And so I'm talking about that because last year there was a chance that Wake was going to backdoor their way into a bowl at 5 and 7 if they had won the regular season finale at Syracuse. This year, I don't think that's even in the realm of possibility. Some of those teams are going to win. So this is it for Wake. This is the last one, and they get a chance to win for the second time at home. It'd be their first FBS win at home since last year's game against Pitt, which, let me tell you, if you thought Saturday's game between Duke and Virginia Tech was a dumb game, it was not any dumber than the end of Wake Pitt last year.
I'm trying to think too. There's going to be some extra motivation for Diaz, although there are more games in the regular season now by one. If this team gets to 9 wins, not only is Dad right, God, I can't believe I have to say that, but this is going to be the most wins by head coach in season one in program history, because Goldsmith finished 8-3. Diaz would finish 9-3, and he'd have some bragging rights. That's got to be. I'm sure this team is going to want to send him off with a win. I can't imagine that that's not going to be motivating them some.
I don't know if that enters the lexicon. I'm
Well,
always
it will now because we're talking about it. So it is
right,
now. It
right,
is.
right.
We're making it happen.
I'm always curious. Like a lot of times, I find myself when I ask players if they're aware of something, they're in such a silo during the season. They don't know what's going on. Well, sometimes you'll get a player that doesn't even know who the next week's opponent is. Sometimes I don't really believe those guys, but that's what they say at least. Other times you bring up a stat and think that a player doesn't know it, and they'll be like, "Yeah, I saw that on Twitter," or "Yeah, we talked about that in our position group meeting." It's like, "Oh, well, glad
We
we're
listened to the
actually on the
Big
same
J Little
page."
J show. We heard about it.
Yeah, shit. I should be more careful about what I say if I know you guys are listening to this. But yeah, it's interesting, and I do think there are a lot of parallels with Manny Diaz's first season and Mike Elko's first season when you start breaking down the way Duke was talked about entering the season, having very low expectations. Nobody really knew what to expect of either team. This year was a lot because of the rebuilding efforts on the offensive and defensive lines. Um, you get to this point and it's like, oh my God, they've had this magical season. You caveat it a little bit with who they've beaten. Like I think Duke's best win to this point is probably against a 6-5 Carolina team. Um,
Yeah, but
but that doesn't have like
nobody was talking about an easy schedule for Duke at the start of the season. I
no, well, that's yeah. I have my own qualms with the way we talk about football in August and July being
right.
the dumbest time of the year when we talk about football.
And there's a lot of teams on Duke's schedule that are either going to a bowl or still can get to a bowl. You got
Yeah,
NC State. If NC State wins, bowl eligible. If Virginia Tech wins the Commonwealth Cup, bowl eligible. That's two more teams. And you've got UConn, you got Georgia Tech, you got SMU, you got Miami, you got North Carolina. Feel like I'm forgetting somebody, but I mean,
What's I don't I've lost track, but what's Northwestern's record?
I think they're 4-7.
Gotcha.
But I mean, my only point is, yeah, you can say the schedule not great, but I mean, my God, it's not like anybody in the Big Ten's really played anybody. I mean, Indiana until they played Ohio State hadn't really played anybody, and Penn State lost the only important game it played,
Yeah.
which
And
is, and I'm not knocking James Franklin. It's a long season. It's hard to go undefeated. I think it's kind of a lazy take to dunk on Franklin for that. I'm not going to do it, but you can just make the point that, well, every time they play a big game, they lose. It's a long season. It's hard to win.
yeah. And like this isn't basketball where you can basically see how good your team is going to be in the off season and you set your schedule up. If your schedule is set so far in advance that it's 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 just really difficult to criticize people with football scheduling. And then you're dealing with the mega conferences. I mean, Duke isn't what are there now? 17 teams in the ACC. So Duke plays 8 of them. So they play exactly half of them when you figure you take Duke because they can't play themselves. They tried to do that in the spring game and had enough of offensive linemen to have
Oh
a
my God.
have 11 on 11 for about half of it. But yeah, you play half of your conference. So it's like when I was sitting here and I was on Saturday afternoon when people were reacting to Indiana and how bad they looked against Ohio State. It's just kind of like, well, what did you expect? Indiana's played the bottom of the barrel in the Big Ten. They've played one team in the Big Ten in the top half of the standings. Now they can't play themselves, but they up till Saturday they had dodged Ohio State and Oregon and Penn State, um, Iowa, I think. So it's yeah, it's
Well,
really tough to criticize strength of schedule in this day and age of college football.
in the Georgia Tech game, Duke had a chance to win was leading in the fourth quarter. That was against Haynes King, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Georgia Tech fell off because of injuries at the quarterback position. And I don't care who you are, it's hard to replace a quarterback in season. So, and of course, off season as well. So I think that the Duke hadn't played anybody stuff is just kind of a little bit of a lazy take, and it's not really looking at all the factors that go into that. And a lot of people have been saying that coming into the game on Saturday and then in the aftermath. But be that as it may, look, man, we got one more regular season game. All right. Duke's riding high. Wake's kind of in a tougher spot, a little transitional season again. Who do you think is going to, well, let me put it like this. One, who do you think is going to win? And then tell us what a Duke win and a Duke loss would look like.
I think Duke probably wins. Um, I think a Duke win. I'll start on the defensive side with the stronger side of the ball. I think a Duke win defensively would be like the best way to play Wake's offense is to either pressure it up the middle or crash the edges and trust your corners in one-on-ones. We know Duke trusts Chandler Rivers. I'm pretty sure Duke feels good about either Joshua Pickett or Kamari Robinson, who's ever lined up on the outside, or what they've been doing is dropping Chandler to nickel and giving Cam Bergeron some breaks and getting all three corners on the field at the same time. Like they trust all three of those guys. They've been playing a ton of snaps all year. So, and then as long as VJ Anthony is back, he was a little bit of a surprise that he was out on Saturday night. Manny said, I'm trying to remember the way he phrased it. It was just a little muscle pull. They thought he was going to be able to go and he couldn't. So you figure he somewhere between probably and maybe will be back for this one. VJ Anthony and Wesley Williams on your edges, you can pressure the edges. You can cause some havoc in backfields with those two guys. And then the season Aaron Hall has had and Kenny Charles in the middle. Like
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Duke has the pieces to really be
Ozzie
disruptive
Nicholas.
against this Wake offense. And if you do that, if you throw Wake out of its sync offensively, um, I don't want to say you've got the game won, like you still have to score, but it becomes a lot easier when you stifle Wake offensively. Um, as far as Duke's offense,
Yeah, just watch the Virginia Tech game. If it's like that again, as far as but without the big plays, I think that's what the Duke loss looks like, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, if you have a quarterback throwing off of his back foot on bailout throws that are headed toward nothing good happening, then yeah, it can be a loss. Um, gosh, I made a joke earlier today. I'm a big fan of the tired and wired jokes on Twitter. I said tired would be a quarterback throwing 3 touchdowns and 3 interceptions in the same half. And the wired one, the new hip part of that is a quarterback flipping double birds to his coaching booth. Um, as long as Duke can accomplish one of those three things, like if you get the touchdowns, if you get the explosive plays against a Wake secondary that has been torched by people before, surprisingly wasn't torched by Miami and their Heisman contender. Then yeah, you can run the score up there. I mean, it couldn't be a long day for Wake's defense. Then again, like I told you, Wake's defensive game plan is going to be to make Duke impatient. Um, and they were able to do that to pretty good success against one of, if not the top offense in the country. Certainly the best offense in the ACC this year. So that's the challenge for Duke, really, at least on offense.
And to your point about trusting Pickett, I did get a great shot of his interception. So check out my Instagram. Really,
Talk
really
talk
excited about that shot.
talk about awareness. I don't know. This might be giving him a little too much credit, but he dropped a fourth down interception that would have been a bad play. Like it would have cost Duke about 8 to 10 yards in field position. I'm always I'm always fascinated with whether guys know if a fourth down interception would be the right play or not. But then the interception that he does get, it's on fourth down, and he improved the field position. Like he got enough on the return that he got past the line of scrimmage and was like, oh, that was the right play. He made the right play in both fourth down situations that they threw his way.
Yeah, and if Terry Moore can continue to be in the right place, right time, again, somehow, some way, that guy has been everywhere. He almost had another pick. I was talking to Dad about that earlier, and I felt like if they had called it an interception, it would have stood. Looking at it, I just felt like saying the call on the field stands was the right call. I mean, granted, I didn't see all the TV views, but from what I saw on the monitor, it just seemed like actually an instance where the replay standard was applied correctly. So.
I felt like with either 5 or 10 seconds left in the game and how dumb that game had been, that it needed to just end right then and there. And we did not need to have a crazy lateral type situation. But Duke played that play well. And one of the things that goes unsaid about those crazy lateral plays is they're not practiced very often. Like,
Yeah, 'cause people get hurt.
yeah, you don't run through those at full speed when you're practicing every week because of that. So the, they look a lot easier to defend because of how infrequently they work, but they are kind of difficult when you think about how often or uh how rarely those are actually practiced.
Well, Connor, you have been kind enough to come on here. I'm going to go ahead and take Duke to win for the record, too. I'm going to stick with no score predictions as per my custom this year. But you have been kind enough to come on here and give us your thoughts on Duke, Wake Forest, where the programs are, and what to expect on Saturday. So I'm going to give you an open mic.
Whew. I think I will. I think this is a little bit of a repeat of maybe two appearances ago with you that I did this. I make an appeal to subscribe to objective, strong team site coverage. Um, that's me at Devils Illustrated. Um, but really, it's an appeal to people to subscribe to any objective coverage. Um, I think that's the best way to digest sports information. I think it's dying in this day and age. I just think that there's so many clickbait type sites. There's so many people that want your attention for the wrong reasons. I just want to tell cool stories and make fans smarter about their favorite teams. I want to give you some numbers, some things to look for, some cool, nuggets to educate people. I've never thought of myself as a teacher, but it is kind of the way I started looking at it. It's like I just want to give you things that you need to know when your team is on the field. If you're watching on TV and it gets repeated on TV, then that's a little feather in my cap. If you're at the game and you realize like, hey, they're doing a lot of this or they're going a lot to the guy that I happen to see as a player to watch, then that's another feather in my cap. So subscribe to those types of sites. Duke.rivals.com is where you can find mine. And I'd really appreciate it.
And you should do it. I subscribe. It is well worth it. And you learn a lot of good stuff. Some stuff that, of course, got to keep in house and trust tree, if you will. So definitely do that. Connor, thank you so much for coming on, folks. You know where to find us, bullcitycoordinators.com. We are everywhere you get your podcast. Check us out on the socials at Duke FB Coverage. Also, check out the Classical Antiquity Side Quest. It is almost December, which means we have another episode that's going to drop mid-December. I've got some others that I am recording. So we've got a few more planned out. Also do some movie reviews. Try to get a chance for me to go see Gladiator 2. Did not care for the first Gladiator, as you all know, but I'm going to do this and I'm going to watch it and we'll maybe do a movie review of that one as well. We will see. I will have my thoughts on it, but check out the Classical Antiquity Side Quest at the YouTube channel along with the podcast. And hey, like and subscribe. Way far away from where I need to be to make money off of the YouTube channel, but still like and subscribe. Call, leave a message. You can get on the podcast 540-632-0160. And hey, let's send this team off to finish the regular season with a big win on Saturday. Let's say it together. As always, go Duke.